Okie dokie. So I want to get into something real quick that has to do with Rocky Mountain Custom Jigs. Raymond Ramirez. I'm continually wrap myself around that word. Uh, Promoting his product, pimping the jigs, so to speak. The thing with where I go is that stingers work very well. And you can get stingers pretty much all over, and you know they're just that little tail, and it moves all the time. Now the central point of this video is to talk about that wiggle that the stinger has and why it's so effective. This particular one has gold flake, clear bottom, and then that more opaque white, and still has flake in it. I like that one. Even in dirty water, it still shows up very well to fish. I don't have very many of these left. This is like just a complete foil clear. That one shows up really good in a lot of water. And I have the classic straight pepper flake monkey milk. I got quite a bit of those. And the more of the monkey milk with the gold tail. It's kind of opaque. This one shows up pretty good in water too. And what I use for heads is a couple of different kinds. I use hammerheads. You see that one? That one's all scored to shit. That's from hitting it against a culvert to get it to the fish. And I use ball heads that I flatten out and glue the eyes on. Okay. And regular ball heads. These are, think, 1/64th. I like to put the eyes on them. It tends to get a better hit rate. You know, they look more mental-like when they have eyes. It's staring right at the fish. They're like, I'm eating you. Now, there are times where I'll take these heads and I'll flatten them out and I'll chop off like 98% of the lead. So there's like a little nug right around the 90 degree of the hook. Just enough to sink it, but it's so light that it's really slow and the body will just kind of shimmer, shimmer, shimmer. Now I got pulling these back up. So the reason that this is important to notate this jiggle with the stinger, the reason the stinger is as effective or more, even in moving it in water, a lot of times, than a curly. This requires motion to motion. This requires no motion. It's moving all the time it's in the water. This requires movement. Okay? Now, if you're doing moving bait stuff, that's great. But if you're trying to be very finesse, if you're thrown into a culvert, if you're thrown into a deep pocket, if you're floating on a river, you know, like with a slip bobber or a cork, okay, stingers are about the best there is. I like these stingers more than I like slap tails. And slap tails are those ones that they get kind of the beaver tail on the back, because they have a lot of motion too, but it's more of a wave motion. This is just jiggling. See that? I'm barely moving my hand and it's moving all over the place. You don't even have to use a rod tip. Now, occasionally, a lot of crappie guys will, when they're rolling in real slow, they'll tap the rod to get a little more action. If you do anything more than that little tap or just reeling in with it motioning like this, it starts not looking natural. So it's one of those things where, like, I'll put it under a slip bobber, like 5-6 foot, if it's like 8 foot deep where I'm at, because a lot of big crappie will sit toward the bottom, and it'll get just absolutely blasted. I mean, that thump comes hardcore at that point because they see it as natural. It doesn't have to particularly look like the bait in the water. Case in point, place in Scottsdale that I go to, a lot of times that 98% chopped off head with one of those stingers tossed in the culvert at that pond will elicit thunderous thumps from the biggest of crappie in that pond. And they'll be 7-8 foot inside that culvert, because that culvert, they pull water in and push water out. It's in a constant state of flux. So it pushes a lot of sediment, which brings the bait fish in, because the bait fish eat the phytoplankton. The The phytoplankton come in and eat on all that algae and all the dirt. It's a continual ecosystem that's just a blast. It's a badass pond. But there's a lot of waters like that. If you have the Salt River, for instance, if you're here in Arizona, any river, Mississippi River, Missouri River, Ohio, like all the different ones that go all through the southern and eastern states. Any body of water that has dirty to clear water, a stinger is going to hit some type of panfish. They just blast, okay? Let's talk about stingers. Now, if you choose to use curly tails, yeah, I buy them from the store, I'll admit it, but I get more now from Raymond Ramirez with Rocky Mountain Custom Jigs because I love his product, okay? I like how he does his heads. These have just the regular keeper. There are several varieties that I've had. I've gone through a lot of them. This particular one, I don't have it screwed all the way on. Turn it one more time, actually. It's a screw-on head, so it's got a thread on it. There we go. And it's a curly Q piece of metal, a screw, right, for the head, and it's put on when he casts it, just like the other ones I showed you, which makes it really, really, really secure. You can kind of see it peeking through there. They really don't care about that when they see it flying by, because when they got a hot tail on it, yeah, they blast it. Now, with Raymond's curly tails, this is his emblem, by the way. Look him up online. Dude is phenomenal customer service guy. Phenomenal, okay? You'll never be disappointed with Raymond. He stands by his stuff 100%, okay? 1,000%. Here's one of those ones that has a screw lock. I prefer the screw locks, and the reason being because the bodies shred less than they do on one of these. Now, you can also use one of these if you super glue, but it's still not as tough as a body put on like this. I mean, you see this, it's on there. It ain't coming off for a long time. The tail will come off first, and then I'm going to get into that for a second in a minute. The difference with Raymond's full colors is that the mold does it in one shot. Okay, I believe that he uses a different mold for the bicolors because there's a slot in the body that the tail is in. Okay, and there are times where I get them, and it's no fault, as far as I'm concerned, it's no fault of Raymond's. I think heat here in Arizona kind of has something to do with it. If I leave stuff in the car, I think it tends to separate certain things because I've had other soft plastics melt to a point in the car because it gets over 100 degrees in my car during summer. Just understand that you might want to keep super glue in your pack if you're taking these so that you can repair the tails. There's nothing wrong with them. They come out of this pocket. If you super glue them in or put them in, take a lighter and glass the plastic, you're not going to have that problem anymore. And he's offered to fix the issue for me and send me more. And I've had some more stuff shipped, but it's really not a big deal to me because I know that I can fix them with a lighter. I know that it's not that hard to do. So I just do what I got to do, you know. Now, occasionally I'll hit them up on the culvert to the point where they'll pop an eye off. At that point in time, I just toss it. It's not going to cost me anything much to replace it. So I just figured I would show those things and explain that stuff because you're robbing yourself, in my opinion, you're robbing yourself economically of a better deal by going somewhere like a box store and getting those things. Yeah, they might be fairly cheap to buy, but the material is cheap, okay? They're not as good. The soft plastics that hand pourers use are usually way above par for what they do. So I recommend going to Raymond Ramirez personally. Rocky Mountain Custom Jigs. I've gotten hand ties from the man, even though I've hand tied myself. I've gotten all of my jig heads, for the most part, that I hand tie on from Raymond, because he's got spares up to wazoo, and he will sell them to me. And he may very well for you. If you ask, give a certain a deal on a certain amount. Say grab bag, multiple colors. If you're more specific, well, then it's going to be down to what does he have in stock, because he has to paint and do his own jig heads. So he's a very generous person, and his product is phenomenal. And if there are issues, he will work as hard as he can to rectify them. He won't be like a box store that says, we'll just buy another pack. He's going to fix it. So I fully endorse what he does on every level. His hand ties through his soft plastics, his ice fishing soft plastics that I used for bluegill during the summertime. All of it is badass.